A couple of years ago for Car Trek, we had a cheap off-roader challenge, and I began with a $2,000 Porsche Cayenne S from 2008 that I found on Facebook Marketplace without a title. And along with Bryson Richards from 380 Industries and Cameron Davis of DC Motorworks, we turned it into one of my favorite cars that I've ever owned. I mean, it was also the car that everybody around me just loved so much because it was different than an exotic supercar or something like that. It felt approachable, it felt accessible, it felt real, and it felt useful, and it was. We used it to drive up a ski slope in Breckenridge and had an absolute blast. But I did end up selling that car, and to be honest, as soon as I finished the car, as soon as I saw it all put together, painted orange and looking awesome, I had this immediate regret that we hadn't started with a nicer base car. I mean, obviously the goal was to have a cheap off-roader, but it was such an awesome thing. I wanted to have a nicer one. This one had 200,000 miles. It smelled like a Rob Pitts ashtray, and it had all the old Cayenne problems that you could imagine. And so around that same time, I had gotten to know the team from Swae on Gold Rush Rally. They had brought a gold carbon fiber Huracan, and we'd begun some discussions about things that we could work on together. Now, Swae, we've talked about a lot. They were our partner for the VINwiki cheap Lambo sell-off. They've also supported the channel over the years. But Swae is a research and design studio based in Northwest Montana, and they have facilities for rapid prototyping and screen printing and all sorts of different things. They do a lot of awesome stuff, and ultimately they're going to be launching a very high-end clothing line soon. But we've done different projects with them, talked about how to build the ultimate rally car, and generally what they do is partner with somebody who's doing something a lot of times in the automotive space, help them through different ideas, and help to make it as good as it possibly could be. And so we started talking about how do you build the ultimate on and off-road Cayenne. And so we started to look at different ones to start with and really narrowed in on the 958 Cayenne Turbo. We started to think about, all right, once we build these things, what do we do with them? What is the ultimate way to test the ultimate Porsche Cayenne? Now, we talked about different drives we could go on, like circumnavigating the globe or even just doing Peking to Paris, but unfortunately both of those require going through either Russia or Iran, which is rather difficult these days. We talked about the Pan American Highway, but in 2021, COVID meant that you couldn't cross all the borders. In 2022, Peru overthrew its government. In 23, we had a massive storm in January that took out the roads in Costa Rica, Panama, and in Colombia. They're still not rebuilt to this day in Colombia, so you can't drive the entirety of the Pan American Highway. So we were just looking for what could we do to really put these things to the test, because as they came together, again, with the help from Bryson and other sponsors and things like that, they really were just awesome. They were ready for anything, and so we were looking for the right drive to go on. And this was all leading up to Swae Day. So every year, Swae has an open house at their headquarters in Columbia Falls, Montana. And honestly, they do this, or at least it began, so that they could show their neighbors that they're not actually in there building bombs or something untoward. Because, you know, when you see all their crazy cars and all the things they're doing and the facilities, it looks like something weird could be going on there. And so they invite everybody in, they show them all the 3D printers and the robot dog and all the things that they do. And it's an amazing event. So I've been the last 3 years, and it's open to the public. So if you get a chance to show up there, by all means do. So they wanted to just promote this idea of going on your expedition, whatever your expedition is. We've all been cooped up for the last few years. It's time to get out and just drive. Do whatever it is. Get off the couch and go drive. And so kind of branding this as a Swae expedition and as the first real test of our Porsche Cayennes, we got all four of them ultimately to the headquarters to head out in different directions. Now, I'd actually started at Car Week in Cayenne 22, done the 408 Garage Rally and other events, and I road tripped with Trevin, one of the owners of Swae, and his wife Emma, back up to Montana to have the final preparation of the cars and ultimately to leave a few days later. Now, of the four cars, one was going to go with Christopher Michaels leading a team in a southwestern direction, do Salt Lake and Moab, and ultimately end up in LA and then be brought back up by the JR Garage crew. And they'll be here to talk about that at some point. So in the two kinds that we had going north from Swae to Alaska, it was me and John Ficara, Trevin and Emma from Swae, Kevin Bandy, who helped in the early days of building the VINwiki app and website, and Gabrielle Schmaderer from Barrett-Jackson. And so we were going to be in Cayennes 23 and 24, doing a 6,000-mile round-trip loop up to the top of the world. We'd all convened in Montana, and then the final car was eventually going to make it down to Key West. So kind of go in all directions, prove the cars out, see what works, see what needs to be changed, and really just prepare us for whatever adventure comes next. Now, the idea of driving all the way to the top of Alaska, which is 3,000 miles in each direction from Montana, is rather treacherous, at least in the way that it's generally described. You'll hear rumors of potholes that could swallow an entire car, frost heaves that cause undulations in the road that'll send a tractor trailer airborne, gas stations that are spaced out so far that no car could ever do it on a stock tank capacity, animals that'll jump out in front of you and try to destroy your car, rocks flying from everywhere, roads that wash out every week and delay you for days and days on end. And so you never really know what you're going to get, but there's a lot of mystery, a lot of folklore, and a lot of mystique about that drive up to these oil fields at the very top of Alaska. That felt like the perfect challenge that would be some on-road, some off-road, some on terrible road. We didn't really know, but we knew that we had tried to make these things prepared for absolutely anything, both in the way they were built and in the way that we prepared them and packed things and stuff like that. And so that was the idea. We're going to set off, and 6 of us in 2 Cayennes are going to the Arctic Circle, ultimately to the Arctic Ocean, for a little bit of a swim. And so we set out, and we've kind of broken it into 4 days. Now, everybody was accustomed to long-distance driving and rallies and things like that, but the idea of effectively 8 straight days of 15 to 18 hours of driving was not something that anybody really was ready for, I think. And so there was a lot of, what in the world are we doing, and how is this going to continue, and are the rigs going to hold up? But for the first couple of days, honestly, the roads were like, bad Mississippi roads. There was nothing really treacherous, difficult, or anything like that. I was honestly a little bit embarrassed that we might be on an adventure that we were so overbuilt for. I mean, we certainly had a gun in a knife fight, but as the days wore on, the duration certainly added to the difficulty. But on the 3rd day, as we got towards Fairbanks, and certainly on the 4th, as we went all the way up to Dead Horse and Prudhoe Bay, things did change rather rapidly. The road just starts to crumble apart. And keep in mind that we're doing this in the fall. What tends to happen is throughout the winter, the roads get destroyed, and they generally get rebuilt, most of them, almost every year. And so you pass a ton of construction whenever you go up there, a lot of pilot cars and things like that. But we do start to see these massive potholes and these washed out roads and these really difficult surfaces. But the Cayennes were doing perfectly. No error lights, no real issues. Now, we had done a special glove box delete that the guys at Swae had helped us to design. They'd also done special badging for the cars and limb risers. They looked awesome. They were just ready to go. And I felt like, in the same way that I kind of described 10 years ago, the CL55 from the Cannonball record as the ultimate road trip car, this was the ultimate road trip to anywhere car. These things were just so cool. And they were really everything that I had dreamt of. And that's what Swae is all about, is, bringing your dreams to life and just coming alongside you to make sure that you have even more capabilities and more manufacturing possibilities with them. So we're driving up, we're seeing every kind of amazing animal, moose and elk, bison, caribou, deer, all sorts of different things, but they all stayed where they were. It wasn't like driving around Metro Atlanta where there's a dead deer on the side of every road. We didn't see a single one. Now, that might have been because we saw so many bears that would have just grabbed that and eaten it for a good snack. So perhaps that is happening, but I don't know. It was really a non-issue for us, other than we wanted to stop and take pictures of all of them, but you're not allowed to get up there and take selfies with them. But at the end of the day, it was a gorgeous trip. And that was really the immediate reality that we saw, because we went through Banff National Park and Jasper National Park in Canada. Just the sights and the scenes and the mountains and everything else. And it's so nice to honestly just have no cell service and just drive. There's a lot of times in my life where I just need some windshield time just to get out, not be worried about everything. I've been able to kind of schedule all of our VINwiki videos beforehand, so even though I couldn't attend to them quite as closely as I normally would, it all went to schedule and everything got released. But Christopher Michaels had done most of this drive before, and he mentioned something that really started to resonate with me. He said, once you're out there, it really feels like you're off leash. That, yes, there's some infrastructure. Yes, there is some, truckers going every once in a while. But at the end of the day, you're just out there on your own almost the entire time. And it feels like if there are responsibilities of the real world, you just can't do anything about them for a little while. And it was something that I definitely needed. It's been a busy year and a lot of stuff with family and everything else. And all of it has been very, very good, but it's also, stressful and time consuming and all the things. And so the chance to take a week and just drive and see these beautiful sights and go to places that I never had been. Now, I do really love a Cayenne. I've never been able to fall in love with a 911. The roof RT12S wasn't any good. The 993 had some novelty to it. Even the 996 Tina from from Car Trek 6 was really cool, but they just never really feel special enough at whatever the value seems to be. But we were loving these Cayennes, but they were almost too good. And that thought crept in a lot, and it really reminded me back to that drive in Breckenridge for Car Trek where Tyler and Freddie are screaming for their lives, thinking they're gonna fall off this mountain. And I was worried that we weren't doing anything that was actually challenging enough. And so I was insulated from it by just how great the platform is. And these cars were doing so well that it almost seemed like if you were up there in some really terrible car, kind of like the thought of driving these cheap cars up to shoot them off the cliff in Alaska for the 4th of July, that might have made it more exciting. But when you added in the distance and everything else, we were certainly feeling the drive. And the Cayenne just felt like perfection, at least perfection in that moment. Now the roads were very far from perfection because on that last day, on the drive up to Dead Horse, when you're on the Dalton Highway, also known as the Hall Road, I mean, this road is destroyed. It's constantly destroyed over and over again. And so we're dodging potholes and jumping off of the little whoops and the frost heaves and all of that. But the real issue is that you have to cross the Canadian Rockies. And there's a pass called the Adigan Pass, and it is all mud. And they say it changes every day. And I could certainly see that. It's pouring rain at this point, but the Cayennes are doing awesome. You know, we've maximized tire size and sidewall to be up for just about any kind of terrain. We still use the stock suspensions because they were really well engineered and they allowed you to adjust height and things like that. And we were experimenting with a couple different tires. We had a set from Firestone. We also had some KO2s just to kind of see the differences. And honestly, they were both very, very much up to the task. Maybe the Firestones were a little better on pavement. Maybe the KO2s were a little bit more rugged, but we loved them both. We really just were falling in love with the Cayennes. Now at this point, we've broken both of the windshields. A lot of the rattles are starting to present in a pretty meaningful way, but we're having a blast. We're really bonding as friends and as a team, and we're bonding with the vehicles. So we get through the pass, dodging the truckers that are struggling with the elevation and everything else, and we are now in the tundra, which is a radical transformation in, you know, really what it looks like. You start to see muskox and things like that wandering around on the sides. And then as you get right up to Prudhoe Bay, the last 80 to 100 miles is the most perfect road that you've ever seen. Apparently 4 years ago, the river that runs along it just washed the entire road out and they had to totally rebuild it. So it's a surreal thing to drive along because again, it's just perfectly smooth, perfectly flat, elevated now 15, 20 feet over sea level, and that just takes you into Prudhoe Bay. Now, Prudhoe Bay is really just there for the oil workers to live. They live in these camps, which are kind of like makeshift hotels that, you know, are really just designed to have a place to sleep and eat. Really, really odd. And we get there and it's like a moon base. Now, of course, we arrive around midnight, 1 a.m. The sun is still out because the sun doesn't really set right now. And then obviously during the winter, it doesn't really come out. And so these guys are at times braving 80 degrees below zero with no sunlight for days, which I can't fathom, but they're all there, you know, to make good money and work hard and to make sure that we still have gasoline to enjoy these amazing cars. And so we walk into our camp that I'd been able to book bunks in for everybody to sleep. And as we're going in the door, the only human being that we have seen in the, 20 minutes that we've kind of been in that area immediately recognizes Picara and recognizes me as a huge VINwiki fan. I do have to say that as a percentage of people that we saw that knew about me, knew about VINwiki, knew about us, Alaska and Canada are certainly the top 2 places that I have been. So thank you so much for watching, the audiences of Alaska and Canada. Went out to swim in the Arctic Ocean, which was 38 degrees and rather miserable. But hey, it was a blast and very refreshing. I am not a cold plunge guy, and I don't think I'm going to begin to be one. I didn't feel any better after it, but it felt good to have kind of reached that end point. I picked up some rocks from the Arctic Ocean to take to my son. It just felt like kind of the right end. Now, of course, this was not the end at all because we had to drive all the way home. And I think that really set into the rest of the team as well that, yeah, we made it, but we still have 3,000 miles to get back. And then I was going to have another 2,000, 2,500 to get back home to Atlanta. So we set off trying to keep good pace, but we're taking a few more pictures and things like that. So the days get quite long. On the way down the Dalton Highway, we started to talk to one of the truck drivers on the CB radio. And so we had CBs in both of the cars, and that was important because you've got to communicate to these truck drivers as you're passing them, and we tried to be courteous. Now, he said something very interesting, that most of these truck drivers actually take 2 different radios in their trucks. And one of them is for a CB on channel 19 like you'd normally see. The other is an FM station that they all have access to, and they can broadcast throughout the entire road using that. that so they can know if they need to not start because the road's washed out or whatever they could learn. And they said the moment that we were on the highway in what they called the orange race cars, everybody knew that we were being considerate, that we were giving everybody space, being respectful, announcing ourselves, letting people know, and that they had all agreed to sort of let us go and let us go by without any interference, as opposed to, I guess, the alternative. And so we really got to know this guy, Jim, and he ended up letting Trevin ride in the truck for a little while, right, with the Cayennes right in front, and got some cool pictures and things like that. He'd been driving this road for 30 years, and it ended up, I think, on the way back down, taking us probably 12 and a half hours, not going super fast or trying to set any records, obviously, but he said that his record was actually in the winter, because in the winter, they grind up ice and they actually make the road out of ice. They keep it rough so that it grips, but he said the hot tires on the ice actually grips better than you could possibly imagine, and he said on a bobtail run, he did 8.5 hours, which is phenomenal. But he was a super nice guy, told some great stories. Maybe we'll be up here someday to tell some more. But it's just one of those things that you never know exactly what's going to happen. But everybody that I've ever spoken to that's made one or more drives up there says something always happens to, make it more difficult or even stop you in your tracks. Now, the next day, we really experienced that, because on the road from Fairbanks down to Whitehorse, you're really just driving through the Yukon Territory. Now, the Yukon Territory is huge, and it has about 39,000 people, and all but about 10% of those live in Whitehorse. So, we talk about colonizing the moon or Mars or anything like that. There is endless open space for anybody that wants to go brave difficult conditions to go live up there, and it is spectacularly gorgeous. But we're driving along at night, and the moon is gigantic, and Emma's like, I'm gonna take a picture of it, and then she says, wait a minute, I think that's the Aurora. So the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, is visible sometimes in some parts of this area. And so we get out, and it's just starting to glow up the sky. And it starts as kind of gray, turning into blue, turning into purple and green, did some reds and everything. And over the course of the next 2 hours, we literally just were able to chase this thing along these gorgeous open roads and stop every few minutes and look out and just see these spectacular sights. The idea that the road is always going to find a way to stop you in your tracks and just let you feel it, let you know that you've done something special, that you've gone somewhere special, and that you've gone at least out of your way, because nobody's living right there. But man, everybody needs to find a way to go there. So we continue on, they kind of fade, and we just kind of have this moment of realizing just what a special opportunity that was, what a bucket list thing that was to check off. And that's really what this was all about. It wasn't for time, it wasn't for records, it wasn't for speed, it was just to go. And I think that anytime you're able to find one of these kinds of adventures, one of these kinds of goals, one of these kinds of drives, it just is an invitation to get out of your comfort zone and just try. Everything gets easier when you just make that first step, put the right team around you, and end up having the adventure of a lifetime. And hopefully it can be a lifetime full of amazing adventures. As we continued south, we got to meet up with the Alaska Sports Car Club on a deserted airfield that they manage, got to drag race these identical Cayennes against each other, and one was a little bit faster, but at the end of the day, we made it back to Swae in one piece. We'd rattled the roof racks loose several times. We almost broke the spare carrier off of one of the cars, but they smelled as bad as you would well imagine they did. We kind of just came away from it as a family, as lovers of cars, as lovers of adventure, as lovers of a good road trip, and a good road trip we had found. So a couple of days later, I made it back home to Atlanta, 12,000 miles in less than 3 weeks. Some amazing memories, an amazing adventure, and honestly, just a reminder that we need to drive more. Get out, go on a road trip, see something you haven't seen, go with some friends that you want to spend more time with, and everything goes great. If you're ready for your next adventure, you're gonna need the right car, and the best way to buy your next car is with the help of Premier Financial Services. The Simple Lease from Premier Financial is the most powerful tool in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits of a traditional loan, like the ability to accumulate equity, pay it off at any time, and they give you a perfectly easy to understand amortization table, but you also get the benefits of a lease, the low payment, the flexible terms, the low down payments, but also you get to use some certain tax benefits that leases entitle you to. They've taken great care of me, and I know they'll take great care of you, so check them out now at the link in the description below.